The BIPOC Coach Collective proudly presents Elevate and Celebrate. This is a podcast to showcase our members, dive deeper into their journeys, and express who they are into the world. Our mission is to curate a brave and authentic space for coaches to connect and to elevate our voices globally in the coaching profession. Learn more about us at bipoccc.org. Your story matters, your voice matters. Let's start the show. All right, this is Alex Dumas, Vice President of the BIPOC Coach Collective, and I want to welcome you back to Elevate and Celebrate. And for members out there, welcome back as we are off of our summer break. So next week, the 13th, is when we're going to have our first facilitation call of the fall. And then on the 27th, we'll be having our regular scheduled open house call. And there might be some other surprise little goodies in the month. You'll stay tapped into that on our events calendar. But this month, we're bringing you Shilpa Alimchandani, and she's one of our champion members, and she is the founder and CEO of Mookti Counseling. She has a diverse background in education space, nonprofit, government. She's also a certified coach, and you're going to learn about her story. You're going to learn about someone who grew up having to do the right thing, or at least having this expectation of being dutiful, being proper, and always on point, and then finding her way, navigating her space into coaching and entrepreneurship and business. And she shares her journey, her wisdom of what she's learned, and the type of clients that she loves to serve, and how their journeys are meant for liberation. And that's how she coaches them. That's how she helps them become more self-expressed and fulfilled into the world. So I'd love for you to tap into this conversation, see what you hear for yourself. Look at this and listen to this from the lens of, Shilpa's talking to me. How does this make a difference in my life? How does this impact me, right? Really sit down and be grounded with this. And I think you can find a remarkable conversation experience for yourself. So all that said and done, let's start the show. All right, we are here with Shilpa Alimchandani. I got it right, woo! And we're so excited to have you on the show and be our guest this month. So Shilpa, thank you and welcome to Elevate and Celebrate.
Thanks so much, Alex. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. You have been one of our amazing champions that we have in our collective. And I want to start off in this way, because what I want people to know about you is that you're the founder, you're the principal of Mookti Consultant. And we had a really fun conversation about this some time ago on, I believe it was on LinkedIn, where we were messaging back and forth. I was like, hey, what is Mookti about? And you sent me some stuff. And I was like, oh. So I would love to just have you explain in your words, because I might botch this and fumble it up. But talk to us about Mookti and how it relates to you and your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mukti in Sanskrit means liberation. And in my coaching practice, my sort of fundamental belief, and where I'm walking alongside all of my coach partners or clients, is in that journey towards liberation, right? All of us as human beings ultimately want to be free, and there's a whole bunch of stuff getting in our way, our socialization, the negative thought patterns that we've internalized, real, societal barriers that we may be facing. But we can't lose sight of our own choice, our own agency, and our desire to be free. So I call what I do collective liberation coaching. And the name of my practice is Mookti as a result.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for that explanation. And this leads me to this next thought of, I would love to hear what led you to that, right? Was there a time before you were maybe feeling trapped, feeling caged, feeling suppressed, and then you said, you know what, I want to be liberated, I want to be free, and I actually, freeing myself, I can help other people do the same thing. So back
I
to
love how you
that journey.
framed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really love how you framed that, Alex, because I think if you had asked me 10 years ago, for example, do you feel free? Do you feel liberated or whatever? I wouldn't really even understand what you were asking. I'd be like, sure, yeah, I am. And now I have a very different understanding of what that means. So I've been working for I guess 25 years now in lots of different capacities. I have worked, in nonprofit and higher ed for the federal government, for a private consulting firm, and for the last 5 years or so out on my own as a consultant and a coach. And that decision 5 years ago to go out on my own, I think was the first really big step I took in that direction of liberation. Until then, I was a dutiful employee, wherever I worked. I was a dutiful daughter in my family. I'm the firstborn, a daughter of immigrants from India and I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. And so I spent most of my life being that dutiful person, right? Setting a good example for my younger siblings, making sure I respected my parents and my elders and the broader community and family. Um, Always being the responsible one, right? In my family, and then even professionally, that carried over, right? Of being the kind of person, because I'd always been kind of crossing cultures myself growing up, is like wherever I ended up, like I'm going to figure out how to integrate into this organizational culture or this space, and learning how to morph myself in lots of different ways so that I could be accepted, right? Wherever I went. And in some ways, that's a great skill set to have. You can also lose things along the way, right? As you're trying to, like a chameleon, change and adapt. And I had a lot of fear too about like not having stability. And so I need to have this full-time job and benefits and X, Y, and Z. So I think a lot of those things weren't necessarily trapping me, but I would say they were limiting in some ways. I had internalized a lot of limiting beliefs about what was possible, about who I was, about what I could do.
Hmm.
And it took me a long time, like I said, to actually make this leap to go out on my own. And when I did 5 years ago, one of the first things I did was register for a coaching certification program. And that coaching certification program was part of my liberation journey as well, because they're learning about the practice of coaching and also being coached by an amazing coach, Erin Trent Johnson. Um, I learned how many ways in which the work I'd been doing a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion work with organizations, leadership work, um, had been taking a toll on me. I don't really think I was aware of it until I was going through that process. And then realizing that, oh, there's so many ways in which I self-silence. There's so many ways in which I'm not truly sharing my perspective or my point of view. And I've just come to see that as normal. And letting go of that was part of my liberation. And it's ongoing, it's not, I don't consider myself liberated, but I'm on a journey, right? Like we all are towards that freedom.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. I love that this idea of not being fully expressed. Not that I love it, but when we hear it, and I want to just counterbalance that, like, where we say, hey, we may not be trapped, but if we're not fully expressed, if we're not being who we are, if we're changing our spots, we're being a chameleon in different spaces, then are we really free? Are we really liberated? And you told me offline that a lot of the work you do is with women of color. So I'd love for you to just share, what have you seen in their liberation journeys? Like how they accepted, or the awareness, or actually, yeah, let me put it like this way: how have you been able to create that awareness with them of like, oh my goodness, I'm not really stepping up as powerfully as I can be in this place, or maybe I am, as you were at one point, dutiful, do the right thing, not
Yeah.
make a big fuss, not ruffle feathers, just be not perfect, but be the example, be the mold. So what has their experience been like working with you?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons in my coaching practice I work primarily, not exclusively, but primarily with women of color because I mentioned earlier it's about collective liberation, right? So I think our freedom is very much intertwined. And some of the same things that have held me back are also holding other people back, right? But we may not necessarily be aware of them, like you noted. So I've worked with women in various stages of their careers, from early career, mid-career, all the way to, people who are pretty senior in their roles or even approaching retirement. And what what my clients and I have in common are some of those limiting beliefs, right? Sometimes a scarcity mindset and um, some fear around trying something different or new, making a big change in our lives, taking some risks. Um, because, there are a lot of like very real reasons why you wouldn't, right? Um, we make calculated risks, of course, right? And many of the people that I work with in coaching, they all have different challenges and they're very different humans. But what they have in common is, like I said, this shared experience of marginalization because of gender, race, ethnicity, um, that has shaped their choices and shaped what they think is possible. And so I really want to partner with them in kind of opening that up, right? Opening up the possibilities, leaning more into an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. That is so much easier said than done. Let me just say, it is so much easier said than done. But I think that's the thread that we have in common.
Yeah, yeah, and just kind of backtracking for a second because you shared a lot about your background in nonprofit and in the government space, education, corporate, and I wonder what inspired you to say, hey, this coaching thing, right? This weird, funky industry, this thing that on paper it seems very simple. I talk to somebody, they listen, and they pay me, and right, but there's so much more nuance to that. So I'm like, what led you to coaching? Like, how did you even go
Yeah.
about it or find your way into this world?
For most of my career, I was doing a lot of education, facilitation, leadership development. So running workshops and trainings and working with groups. And I want to say probably about 10 years or so, 10 years ago? Yeah, 9 or 10 years ago. I remember I based things off of how old my kids are. And I was like, I was pregnant with my second child. So it was about 10 years ago. Um, I started feeling some of the limitations of doing the work in groups. And I was like, sometimes people really need one-on-one or smaller group kind of support in their learning journey and their growth and development. So I got interested in coaching. At the time, I was employed in a federal government agency, and they sponsored me to go to a coaching certification program. And in that first weekend of the coaching certification program, they had, two facilitators, a group of maybe 20 of us. And I was one of the only people who was like, well, what about culture? And what about identity? And what about power? And how does
What
that
about
play
that?
into how we experience our lives and what we need coaching support for? And the facilitators, I think, tried to respond, but really didn't have meaningful or deep thinking on this. And I ended up leaving that job and not continuing that coaching program, which I think was very much the right thing for me at that time, because I was already getting the sense that, like, yeah, I'm interested in coaching, but this is not how I want to do it.
Yeah.
Fast forward 5 more years when I decided to go out on my own, I'm like, I'm going to do it my way. So I looked for a program that really brought that anti-oppression lens, that cultural competency, and and in my certification program, we had, a people of color affinity group within that cohort. And we really, I felt, did the deeper work around power, culture, and identity that I was just naming, and how that also fits into coaching, really being thoughtful about how our identities show up in coaching, who we want to coach, and how what's going on in society is very much impacting the people that we're working with. And so we need to be able to acknowledge all that and not just be like, you're an individual, I want to coach you. Well, yeah, you're an individual, but you're an individual that's part of much bigger systems and communities. And all of that very much influences how you see yourself and how you see the world, right? And so then getting into coaching from that angle really spoke to me, and it was much more meaningful. And that's the journey I've been on since, right? Since I finished that program and have continued building my practice. I still do a lot of group facilitation, training, consulting, but I truly, my love is coaching.
Yeah. And I'm assuming like the one-on-one side, like the really private, intimate conversations with
I
clients.
love that. I want to do some small group as well. I've done some of that because,
Yeah.
again, collective liberation, like we do things in community with each other. But I feel, I don't know if you feel this way, Alex, as a coach, that you really you get to observe and be witness to someone's growth in a very real, tangible way. And it's so fulfilling to be like, wow,
Yeah.
look at what you're doing. Like, I just feel my heart fills up.
No, I can see it. Like your whole everything just like lit up as I can see your mind like thinking the clients, thinking these experiences, their ahas, insights, and obviously the actions they take. And
Yeah.
as you were speaking, like, it was really interesting for me because what you said earlier about fitting this mold, right? Doing the right thing, being the good girl, quote unquote. And you saw this coaching program. This isn't for me. This isn't aligned or is not touching this very personal and very real space that matters to you. And you said, I'm going to break away. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to find my space, my tribe. So I just found that interesting that here the rule follower becomes like the rule breaker.
You know, I have to say, having worked inside of organizations as an employee for so many years, for like 20 years, um, it took some time to like let go of that way of being that I was so used to. And there was also this just sort of like uncertainty of like, oh, I'm starting my own business. Like, what do I want it to be? I didn't actually even build a website for 2 years. I was going off of LinkedIn and word of mouth referral, and I'm very fortunate that um, was able to continue working through that time. But in part, like, I think if I had just like quit my job and started my practice and like built a website right then, it would have been very, very different than what I did 2 years later. Because in that time, I learned so much about myself, about what I enjoy doing, importantly, what I don't enjoy doing. Um, and I just got more and more clear about what I wanted to offer. And then when I did build my website, it was much more focused. It wasn't me trying to be everything to everyone.
Mm,
Rather, it was like, oh, this is who I am, and this is who I want to work with, and how I can support you, individual or organization, right? Um, in your journey, which I think is very, very different than it would have been right as soon as I made that transition.
yeah. Yeah, we have like sort of reverse paths, right? Because I came into a space of look at me, hit the marketing now, build the funnel, they will come. I did all that. Nobody was showing up, right? I got the shiny bells and whistles and I love the
Yeah.
cute stuff, but I didn't have a clear path of like who it is I exactly wanted to serve. I didn't even have the confidence in myself to say like, am I even like good at this thing? Like nobody like, oh, man,
Yeah.
like, all right, time to show up. Hi, super coach. Like, no, it took some time to slow down and get
Yeah.
some more experience and work with people. And I love how you were able to flip that and like, hey, you know what? Let me just be with people, build this as a word of mouth referral, which honestly, in my opinion, right? This is just me. Anybody listening, watching, this is just my opinion. But I feel like that's the strongest way. I mean, that's how business has always been done before we had internet, right? Someone had to
Sure.
tell somebody, hey, go here, experience this. Nobody refers a mediocre cookie, right?
Yeah, people aren't going to talk about it if they didn't like it.
Yeah. So you being able to do that for yourself in a very relatively short window and then gradually move up as you have, that's admirable. And and I want to speak to that for a second with coaches that you interact with. Maybe you see that I don't want to say they're struggling, but like they're still developing their identity. Like if you had some words of wisdom, if you had
Mm.
like 2 minutes with that person, one on one, and they're like, "Hey, Shilpa, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to build. I'm not really getting traction. Like inconsistency here and there." And what would be some advice for them?
One of the things that helped me when I was going through the certification program and, trying to figure out who's my ideal client, and, you have to do practice coaching and things like that. And I worked with a variety of different people when I was doing, gaining those coaching practice hours. And my coach at the time, invited me to pay attention to my own energy in each of those coaching sessions. Like, especially when the session ended, was I feeling, inspired, lit up? Was I feeling drained? Like, just pay attention to your own energy in each of those interactions. And that's how I started to focus in on I want to work with women of color, because there was some kind of, because I worked with a wide variety of, races and genders initially. But the way I felt in those interactions with other women of color, some South Asian like me, some not, lots of different racial backgrounds, um, there was a connection and there was an understanding and there was a depth that we could go to that I didn't experience in some of my other coaching relationships. And paying attention to that helped me to focus in on, like, okay, this is where I feel like I can make a difference. And this is work that I think is mutually fulfilling, right? I started because I mentioned earlier that the work I'd been doing was really draining for me, and I hadn't realized the toll it had taken on me. And so now I was paying more attention to, like, how can I engage in work that's actually mutually fulfilling, right? Where everybody benefits from it. And I don't feel like I've been used, I've been drained, I've been, someone has extracted from me. Instead, like, we both feel really good about the experience. And some of it's hard. I'm not saying like every coaching session is smiles and rainbows. We've had tears, we have all the feelings, right? There's space for all of that. But the depth of connection is very fulfilling for me. And like I said, being able to observe the progress someone makes over time. And so my advice for coaches who are looking to kind of focus in on their practice and figure out what their real strength or gift is to pay attention to that energy and that sense of mutual fulfillment. And that's where you need to invest.
Yeah, yeah, well said. There's something that I borrowed from Richard Lipton from years ago, where he said, pay a lot of attention, be present with the client and in the setting, but also put a little bit of attention on yourself. Like, don't get so immersed that you lose. I don't want to say control, but you lose like where you are, and like, wait a minute, I'm the guide here, or I'm the person that is the objective third party. I don't I don't need to get emotionally charged, or at least on the same level as the client. And that's why, like, this little rock in my hand, I do that as like a little sensory thing, just for me to like remember,
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I'm here too. I'm
Yeah.
with you, but like, oh yeah, I got to come back, make sure I'm back in my home base so that I can
And stay
facilitate
grounded
this.
in that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I actually have a stone on my
Hey.
desk as well that I still do peer coaching with friends from my coaching cohort, even though we finished a couple of years ago. We regularly peer coach each other, and one of my peer coaches did an exercise with me with this stone as sort of a grounding practice. And it's so helpful, right, to have something small like this as a symbol to ground you and anchor you. Um, because I don't know that we necessarily like lose ourselves in coaching, but we do need to remember to pay attention to our own energy and our own intuition. I found that to be one of the most powerful things in coaching, is like being able to access my intuition and then share it with my client when the moment feels right.
Yeah.
Um, and in also helping them to access their own intuition.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about. Like the energetics is so valuable. So for coaches out there listening, watching, it's just something to to be aware of, right? This is not something to perfect. Like we're not saying, hey, this is Shilpa's 3 secrets to being very grounded. It's just pay attention, notice, like, man, where am I? Right? That's one of my favorite questions. Like, hey, where am I at? What's going on with me right now? And did I hear this person effectively? Did I was I in my was I bringing my story into this and like projecting and phew, and now I've done a disservice potentially, not in a harmful, not in an intentional way, but just not in an effective way for that client.
Yep. You know, and I'm just observing how much I changed too through this journey, because even coming into this conversation, Alex, we had a start time on the calendar. I showed up at that time, but I had just come off of a call of facilitation that was pretty emotionally charged for me.
Yeah.
And what has changed for me is that like now I'm able to ask for what I need. And I was like, you know what, Alex, I need a minute. I need to take a breath. I'm not ready to jump right in.
Yeah.
And you were so open and so welcoming of my sharing my need with you and making space for it. I think my previous, very, very dutiful self would not have even asked you,
Mm,
would not have even asked for that time to breathe. Right.
yeah.
So I'm just, as we're talking about this, I'm just noticing the shifts and the changes in myself. And that's what I try and facilitate with my clients too, is like, how do we develop some of these new habits that can help us to stay more grounded and centered in all the choices that we make.
Yeah. That's powerful, right? It's in dependent on backgrounds, cultural makeup, society, right? Asking for what you want can be scary. I know that's been a the going back to the rock. That's been the rock in my shoe. It's not even my shoe. That's like the anvil, the mountain on my shoulder of asking for help, being open to receive it too. It's big.
Yeah, it really is. And there's so many stories we make up about why we don't need the help or we shouldn't ask for it or we're burdening somebody else if we
Yeah.
do.
I should know this already. I'm what if they're gonna judge me for asking? Like everybody needs help. Everybody needs some level of support, and this is perfect bridge. Look at me segueing to community and to the importance of that, and really what I want to ask you is, you've been such a valuable member of our collective, and I just want to love for you to share the story. Like, how did you even get into this world of the BIPOC Coach Collective? Like, how did you wind up in our orbit?
Yeah, I believe I learned about the collective through LinkedIn.
Oh,
And I was like, oh, wow, this even exists because, the coaching world
yeah.
doesn't necessarily look like the BIPOC Coach Collective. And the need for such a space and such a community was great. And I felt this just like excitement and relief when I was like, oh, what is this thing? I need to find out more about it. And so immediately, kind of started following on LinkedIn. And then when the launch of the, membership started about like a year and a half ago or so, I was on that like welcome call and signed up right afterwards because there was a sense of like, oh, these are my people. I found my people. Isn't that great? And had several like one-on-one interactions and came to the anniversary event as well, where it was just so great to be in community with people who looked at coaching in a way that was more aligned with how I see it and how all of our social identities, all of that's happening in the world around us shows up in coaching too. And you don't have to just, coach the individual, right? You can think more holistically about that. That's what really attracted me about the BIPOC Coach Collective. And of course, all the professional development opportunities, networking, et cetera, have been a nice bonus. But like initially, it was just like, yeah, it's finding your people.
Yeah. Finding people. Yeah. Thank you for finding us. Thank you that you wound up in our space, right? It's been a pleasure for sure.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. And I hope the community continues to grow and flourish.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll do that with if people like you are in the world, which I know there are, then right, our web will reach where it needs to. And you I love words. So you said the word see, and this is where I was gonna go with this question here. Is, you're here now, which is a great place, and I'm curious, like, what are you forecasting for your future? Like, what would you love to see for your practice, and even just your life? Like, how do you want coaching really enhance your life?
Hmm.
I know
Yeah,
the
that's a
softball
beautiful
questions.
question. It's a beautiful question, and I don't want to rush to answer it. I think what what I would like to do in the future, which I'm not doing as much of right now, is actually doing some small group or kind of coaching in addition to the one-on-one work I do with women of color. Because like I've been saying, there's so much about community and the collective that's important about our learning and our growth and our journeys, and the support we feel, the I'm not alone in this. And
Mm,
so I would love to do more of that in the future, in addition to doing one-on-one and of course group facilitation. Um, and workshops and all of that, is to maybe like within a sector or even across sectors, people are facing similar challenges, bring them together, form that community over a period of time, so that we're continuing to build the network, the support, all towards that vision of collective liberation. I'd love to do that.
there we go. So it's already done. You spoke it out. So now it's
Will it manifest now, Alex, that I've
yeah.
said it out loud?
But hey, listen, that's like 80% of the journey. Now it's the steps, right? The building
Yeah.
it, the actual creation of it. But I'm a big advocate of words matter, right? Of someone had to speak this microphone into existence, someone had to speak Zoom and cameras and computers into existence to this conversation even happen. So I believe in it for sure. So as we get ready to wrap up, I want to just close out just asking, like, hey, is there anything in this space, anything we've that we haven't touched on, anything that is present on top of mind for you that you want to express while we have a few minutes?
Oh, one thing that's on my mind is that in public spaces, there's been a lot of sort of attacks on diversity, equity, inclusion work, right? And to some degree, the BIPOC Coach Collective is, even if not doing organizational DEI work, is naming power and identity and racial equity as major issues. And there's a lot of backlash against that happening in society, and it's an election year, so there's a lot going on. And so what I want to say is that in the face of that, we need to support each other, right? As coaches, consultants, facilitators, whatever it is that we're doing, to not lose sight of that vision of liberation and equity, even if, anytime you make progress, there's always a backlash, and we know that, we've seen it in the past, we're in it right now. So to not lose hope, and to support each other during a time where there's a lot of uncertainty in our world, right? And we're not sure exactly how things are going to go, but we do know what our values are and what's important, and we need to remember that.
Yeah, and I think for anybody who has questions about that, or uncertainty, or any potential anxiety or uncertainty in their life, I think someone like you being in their corner, championing them and supporting them is a great step towards removing that, or moving through it. Let's put it that way. So thank you for being who you are, and just being a champion for coaches and for people in general.
Oh, thank you, Alex. I'm really grateful to the BIPOC Coach Collective for creating this very much needed space and community. And I look forward to continuing to develop relationships and growing together.
Yeah, for sure. We appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your story, and for sharing who you are, and for where you're going, where we can help take people. So that is as they say, that's all, folks, as we wrap it up. But thank you, Shilpa, once again for your contribution.
Thanks, Alex.
All right, y'all. See you next month. Take care. Thanks for watching this episode. If you got value from this, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. And feel free to connect with us at bipoccc.org. See you next time.